Well, I'm back. I was away for a while. I had some holidays and life got in the way, but I'm starting to work on my car again. But I wanted to do a video for quite a while about why on earth I put an Oldsmobile engine into a Ford product. It's probably never even been done before because it makes no sense, really. But that being said, that's one of the reasons why I do things. I like to be a little different. I'm a bit of a contrarian of sorts, but there is a story behind it, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I mean, yeah, I could have put something else in here, maybe a big block Chevy or LS or anything. It would have been faster and cheaper. Maybe I should have put a Ford engine inside of it. I know lots of guys are brand loyal and you mix things up, they get pissed off about it. But to me, it doesn't matter. I'm not brand loyal. Ford, Dodge, Chevy, none of those guys have ever given me anything, so why would I be brand loyal, right? I just like certain things. But as far as the Oldsmobile engine goes, I like the way the engine looks. I don't like electronics. It's an old style engine. And this whole car is going to have like a 1970s or early 80s kind of theme to it. It's kind of like a street freak in a way. So that's kind of the theme of it. This car doesn't fit into any specific racing classes or anything. It's just, you know, challenge friends and that sort of thing, right? But anyways, I'll tell you this backstory behind this. So back in the 90s, I had my original Pinto, and it was going great. We had a 302 in it, and that sort of thing. But I wanted something better, and I have these books, and I showed some of these books on this channel before on engine swapping, and I got the idea that an Oldsmobile engine would work very well. And I found a friend back then who had a 425 Olds for sale, and I bought it. It was seized right up. And it wasn't because of this water in the cylinder, even though it did have some of that, but it had several spun bearings, and it was just a disaster. And I started working on it. I remember I actually took the engine apart, and I put it on the block on a child's wagon, and it carried it 2 blocks down the street there to this machine shop that was at the local Napa place. It was kind of embarrassing in a way. You're wearing coveralls with this wagon and this block, you're walking down the road. But anyways, I got to the point where I was ready to put things together, and I never did. That engine sat in a shed for probably close to 30 years. But I always had this idea in the back of my mind that I could put one of these into a car. And it's very challenging, obviously. I had to do a lot of modifications to the car itself. But the car is not a tube chassis car, none of that stuff. It's a Pinto or Bobcat car. I mean, the entire thing is the same suspension, everything else. The most intense thing I really had to do is rework the firewall, and of course mounting it and everything else. But really, it's as it was. Okay, so back in the day, I had that Pinto, and I found out this one fellow had a parts car. There's, you know, through command connections or whatever. And I went out to this guy's place, and this guy, I don't know how old he was back then. Maybe he was in his 70s or maybe 60s or something. And I started talking to him, and back in the day, back in the 50s, he was heavily involved with street racing. So he had all these really cool stories. It was like the golden era of this kind of stuff. And me and my friends were out there, and we were just like, wow, this guy's so cool. We're just like totally amazed with all these stories he told us. And he had all these cars in like machine shops at his farm. All these, they had like barns full of Galaxies and stuff. It was amazing. He had his parents' wedding car there, I guess, too. But anyways, we had a great time. But he told me all about his car, and I'm not sure if it was like a T-Bucket or some sort of a Ford, but it was a Ford car, and he had an Oldsmobile engine in it. And I guess he was a street terror at the time. It sounded like it was amazing. But looking back on it, obviously it wouldn't have been a 425 Olds or anything like that. It would have probably have been maybe one of the earlier Olds engines, but regardless. And in my mind back then, you know, maybe the T-Bucket or like an early 30s kind of Ford car would have been a hot rod in that time. Whereas in the 90s, I kind of felt like the Pinto was kind of the equivalent, right? So my stuff was just a more modern version of what he had. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to go with Oldsmobile, because I was just trying to emulate what he had. I was so impressed with this guy. So, you know, moved forward all these years, and I'm here, and I started building this Bobcat car, and the story behind this car was a friend bought it, stripped it right down to nothing. He was going to restore it, and he changed his mind, and I got it from him. And I was going to put a 351 in this, and make a stroke car out of it, 408 or whatever. And I had the engine here, had a bunch of parts for it. I was collecting things for it. my heart just wasn't in it. Like something just bothered me about that swap. And I even have a friend who had a 351 Cleveland, an actual race engine that needed some work, and I came really close to buying that, but my heart wasn't in it. And then I kept looking at, well, something bigger. I was thinking 460, and I was seeking one out, and I just didn't feel right. In the back of my head was this Oldsmobile thing, right? And then one day I seen this 425 Olds for sale on Marketplace, and I'm like, that's it. I got to get that. And I picked it up and started putting it in here, and it just feels right. And I mean, it's going to be a torque monster. It's going to be fun. It'll be pretty fast, I think. My goal really is to have this car deep into the tens. I'm not really too interested in getting to the nines because then you have all this extra safety stuff and it gets too expensive. And I'm not a millionaire where I'm going to be spending so much money on this kind of stuff. So I try to keep my cars, budget friendly. So anyways, yeah, that's the reason why I want Oldsmobile. And I'm very happy with the swap so far. Like, you have to be quite creative to get all these things to work. I'm looking at the firewall right now. You can't see it. It's right in front of me. I'm quite proud of that considering the tools I had. Right now I'm just getting all the parts together to get the block rebuilt. I have some connecting rods, up some pistons, which they cost a fortune for 25. But that being said, the 425 has a forged crank, forged steel crank, and everything else, so it should be pretty beefy on the bottom end. I have some aluminum heads for it already. I have a 950 Holley HP sitting on the bench over here and a torquer intake on that bench. So my goal really, by the end of the winter, I want to have the engine for sure fully rebuilt, maybe even the transmission ready to go, and then I can install that in the spring. I'm going to piss around with a few things in this car, getting it ready, but my shop here, my garage, it's like 24 by 24. It's not insulated. I do have a wood stove in here, but where I live, it gets cold as hell. Like that, it takes about 2 hours to get the stove warm, and it's still cold in here. So getting things done in the garage are really tough in the winter. But that being said, I'm gonna do what I can. I'm trying to do what I can right now as far as welding goes, because the MIG welder is right over here, and I have argon and CO2 in there. But of course, when it gets cold, it's gonna have less pressure in it, and it's not gonna work well. So I'm trying to get as much done as I can. And in the spring, I got a buddy who's kind of into paint work, and we're gonna paint this car. And I don't think I'll have it ready next year, but the year after I will. But we'll get the bulk of it done though. But anyways, that's the story behind the car. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and hope you understand now what the car is a little bit more about. So have a good day. Take care.